Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Coffee and Chat. My name is Caroline Walton. I'm the head of endpoint assessment for Explosive Learning Solutions. Normally you would have Catherine Convery sat in this seat. She is the technical director for Explosive Learning Solutions. However, this week, Kath is in Scotland, so I'm taking her seat. Now, I am really pleased and very honoured to say I've been joined by our guest speaker, the Right Honourable Lord Vaizey of Didcot. Thank you for joining me for our coffee and chat.
You're welcome.
I do know that you know Kath quite well, and you were expecting Kath on this course, so when you got my face, it was probably a little bit of a surprise. I'd like to first of all start by saying congratulations, Ed, for joining the House of Lords. And at this point, I just want to throw in a question that we've had from Jane from Farringdon. I was going to put this at the end, but I'm going to put it in now very quickly. When you became an MP, did the government put you through any formal training? And did they put you through any training when you joined the House of Lords?
The short answer is no, and I think it's a really good question, which is why I think it's great that you started with it, because MPs receive no training at all. And you know, we've seen some terrible incidents come out of the House of Commons of sexist behaviour and worse, in fact. And there are plenty of stories from members of staff who work for MPs about how awfully they are treated. So of course you get given, you know, what you might call your kind of orienteering on your first day at work, in terms of, you know, where the canteen is. And I remember, for example, we were all asked to, we all came as new MPs, and there was a panel of kind of experienced MPs giving tips and advice. And I remember one piece of advice, one MP stood up and said very dramatically, "Speed kills," which is obviously an arresting phrase. And the point he made was that if you respond quickly to your constituents when they email you or write to you, it stands you in very good stead. And he told this story of a man who had stopped him in the street and said, "Thanks so much for, you know, I wrote to you a few months ago and, you know, you replied within 24 hours. It was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much." And the MP said, "Well, what were you writing to me about?" And he said, "I can't remember. All I remember is that you replied very quickly." And I took it, I'm sure there might be people listening to this who will say it wasn't the case, but by and large, I tried to respond very quickly to my constituents, even if it was just a one-line email saying, "I will sort this out for you." The fact that it came from me, and the fact that it came sometimes within 5 minutes of somebody emailing me, because I used to get my emails on my phone, I think made a real difference. But in terms of, you know, I was employing people, no training on how to look after my staff, no training in managing accounts or anything like that. And obviously there was the expenses scandal, that's a good example, and so on and so forth. As I've joined the House of Lords, it's the same thing. You get orienteering, but not much training. And we do now, which is true for MPs as well, you get offered unconscious bias training, which I'm going to do in a couple of weeks, which I'm going to do online, which takes 2 hours. And already some MPs have complained about it, which I think is ridiculous. They've said they shouldn't be doing unconscious bias training because they think it's some kind of woke agenda, which I think is absolute nonsense. But all of the kind of training you would have received, we don't get. And the other interesting thing is, you asked me about becoming an MP and becoming a Lord. Well, actually, I became a minister where I was responsible, in theory, for hundreds of civil servants, and making much bigger decisions than I would make as an individual MP about spending money on big infrastructure projects. Zero training. And I've always said, although the press and in fact constituents would probably be up in arms about it, but if I could wave a magic wand, I would send every minister off for one of those kind of Harvard style executive MBAs, you know, 6-week course about how to run, be a leader. I think would be, frankly, money well spent, and make ministers much more effective at their job. But the short answer is, you've got people representing you as in the House of Commons, people permanently appointed to the House of Lords, and people who become ministers, none of whom receive anything close to what you would call proper management training.
Yeah, because if you think anybody that would come and join ELS, in the company I work for, we go through a probationary period, we have induction training, all our staff and teams are currently going through several mandatory training units. I think there's around 7 or 8 in total. You're given a mentor, or if somebody is in a role and then they progress and they're promoted, you would expect them to have some kind of team leader, supervisory or management training and support. So I'm really shocked at your answer that there isn't anything to support that transition through those roles.
It's pretty staggering, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why I wanted you to ask the question, Caroline, so I get it off my chest and shock you in the process.
That was a really good question, and thank you so much to Jane from Farringdon for sending that question in. I saw that and I thought I'm actually going to stick that near the beginning. So brilliant, thank you. So you were the former MP for Wantage and Didcot between 2009 and 2019. So that's a good 14 years that you represented our constituency, and thank you so much for that commitment for our local areas. Do you miss doing that role?
Yeah, I do. I really enjoy being an MP. It's a massive privilege, and also representing Wantage and Didcot. I've taken Didcot as my title in the House of Lords because it's a fantastic area. It's got absolutely everything you could want in terms of, it's still quite rural. So, you want to go for long walks as I did during the lockdown and not see a soul. You can still do that, even though you're so close to places like Reading and London and Swindon.
Yeah.
It's got this incredible science base at Harwell, incredible companies and life science businesses at Milton Park. It's got a Formula One team at Grove. I mean, it's got the most incredible businesses. So I could spend my day in the constituency visiting businesses that, have global attention. And I could visit them, I could visit a company that was making space satellites. And also the people are lovely. I mean, it's still, the interesting thing about Didcot in particular, for example, is 25, 30,000 people, gets quite a bad press sometimes, but still an amazing feeling of community, even in a town that large. So it was a wonderful place to represent.
Yeah, no, I'm really pleased you said that. Well, one, because ELS is actually based at Harwell Science and Innovation Campus. And I live just down the road as well. So you're on a winner with me already. So that's good. So going back to your role within the House of Lords, what crucial role are you playing within there now?
So the House of Lords is very like the House of Commons in one sense, that I sort of compare it a bit like, it's a bit like playing football. So you're playing the same game as the House of Commons. It's the same rules. You get to take part in debates like MPs do, where you can mouth off about stuff. So I've mouthed off about COVID, for example. You can sit on committees. The House of Commons has select committees that scrutinise government policy. We have select committees that scrutinise government policy. You can put down questions to ministers. You can ask them about policy. So all of that is the same. There are two crucial differences. The bonus, if you like, I shouldn't really say this, but the bonus is you have no constituents. So my poor colleague David Johnson, who succeeded me in Wantage and Didcot, he's not poor, he's delighted to be an MP, but his mailbox is completely different. I was speaking to an MP yesterday who, she's a new MP, and she's had a few constituents complain that her predecessor, they used to reply really quickly to me.
Oh no.
She made the point, I am now getting, because of COVID, because of Brexit, I get 10 times the amount of emails that my predecessor got. She got 10,000 where he would get 1,000. So I can imagine what David's inbox is like. I'm not obviously for a minute suggesting that people shouldn't contact their MP. I'm just saying, as an objective observation with COVID, which has literally affected everyone. You've got an elderly relative, you want to contact your MP. You run a business, you want to contact your MP. You've got kids at school, you want to contact your MP. Everyone will be getting in touch. So I was going to say lucky escape. That sounds terribly rude, but I don't have to cope with what David Johnson is coping with. The downside in being the House of Lords is it's not the House of Commons. Really, if you want to take on the government and change the law, you do it in the House of Commons. The House of Lords can revise legislation. It can sometimes change it, but ultimately it has to play second fiddle to the House of Commons.
Right, okay.
But I'm also appointed for life, which is obviously a democratic outrage, but it's quite nice that in theory, until Boris abolishes the House of Lords, which I'm sure he's capable of doing, I will be in there until I drop down.
Boris is certainly having a very challenging year, isn't he?
He certainly
I don't
is.
know if I don't know if that's a job I would want. It's certainly
Well, every single life-changing experience,
yeah.
you know, I'm sure in terms of your training manuals and your life experience books that you might read, people
Yeah.
say, what are the 3 things that can happen to you that are traumatic? Divorce, he's just got
Yep.
divorced.
Yep.
Moving house, he's moved to 10 Downing Street. Having a baby, it's just he and his partner have just had a baby. So,
Yeah.
and changing job is number 4.
Yeah.
So, anyway, there's my wife coming to
Hello.
join the webinar.
That's not a
Nothing
problem.
stops in the Vasey household.
I'm normally, if I'm working from home, which isn't that often now because the ELS offices opened up on the 6th of July, and our directors and owners, they have invested a lot in making our offices very COVID safe. We've got obviously all the signage round, and we've got big high perspex screens over our desks. But of course, when I'm at home and before the children went back to school, I had the children in the background, or the husband walking through, putting washing away, or doing different things.
Well, if we really want to win people over, my dog will come in at some point, but we'll see.
Okay, so going back to the title of the Coffee and Chat, the link between training and culture. You were the former Minister for Culture, Communications and Creative Industries between 2010 and 2016. And then from July 2014 to July 2016, you were the Minister of State for Culture and Digital Economy. When we look at the challenges we're facing, what challenges do you believe we currently face when we talk about culture and the impact it has within our training environments?
So I spend a lot of time talking about cultural organisations who obviously can't perform at the moment, about how they can do more stuff online and engage with their audiences online. But I think one of my points about cultural organisations is I think they're often too defensive. And actually, I think if ELS, for example, worked with cultural organisations, it would be very interesting, because I think that we underestimate the impact that cultural practitioners can have on the world of business. Now, you and I are both sitting in pretty nondescript rooms. I've got a bit of laundry, the duvet behind me, haven't made much of an effort to dress my set, as it were. And, we talked about neither of us, I don't know what kind of performance training you've had or presentation training you've had. I obviously, to a certain extent have spoken for a living for 30 years, if you like, being in frontline politics. But it strikes me that if you're on a Zoom call, it's quite boring. You're staring at a screen. You'd want to think about, what's my background to keep people engaged? Yeah. How do I project myself when I'm trying to make points online? And you've got distractions like my wife coming in at the back, or the dogs coming in, or somebody's got their phone on their table and they're glancing at their emails. How do I keep people engaged when I'm online? And that's the kind of thing I think cultural organizations can help. The other thing where I think that's quite interesting is, you were talking about coming back to the office and it's COVID safe, but actually, what we miss from the physical office is the banter. We would come into the office, do a bit of work, go to the proverbial water cooler, exchange a bit of gossip, have lunch with a couple of mates. Yeah. All of that is gone. So how do you bring together a team that is scattered to the 4 winds and can only come together on screen? Well, actually, you could do it through cultural performances. I always say choirs. I'm not a member of a choir, but choirs are fantastic organizations to bring people together to have a really good time together. And, could you have a virtual choir for your company where people actually came together to sing together online? Could you put on performances? It could be a comedy performance, a music performance, which everyone in the office watches at the same time and comments on. So can you use culture as a way of bringing together your colleagues at work when you know that you can't physically get together in the office and bond in that way?
I think certainly during our period of lockdown for ELS, we did try as the whole team to get together every week. We get together as a team every week anyway, but we had team calls where everybody would be on that call, and we'd try and make it fun if it was people's birthdays. But it's been a real culture shock, because whereas we, like you said, we'd all be in the office having banter. I really thoroughly enjoy coming in the office. So for me, I like to be able to leave home in the morning. I drop my daughter off at school. I come into the office. Some people still choose to work from home, and that's fine. And we have to keep that communication flowing with using things like Teams. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, our classroom here, we're doing virtual training, and it is very, very hard sometimes to not only to understand what's happening on the other end of the screen, because when we're doing our remote delivery, you sometimes can't always see your students because they might be in maybe breakout rooms or doing activities or reading, and it's very hard to gauge how they're feeling or have they really understood something. So when we went into lockdown, ELS had to change very quickly, and we started putting things remotely, putting our training online. But with that, you have to then upskill and make sure that your trainers feel comfortable and confident to do that. So for me, for many years, I would do one-to-one training, face-to-face or classroom training. I haven't personally done much remote delivery or through, virtually. So if someone suddenly said to me, well, actually, you're now going to be running this virtually and online, I'd be a bit nervous, because that's a big culture shock for me, and having to try and learn that new skill.
And that's a really good point. It is a new skill, and yet we are expected to kind of just do it seamlessly in the way that we can seamlessly do a telephone call. But it is a complete new skill, and there's bound to be a market developing of people who train people how to present online, how to engage a group of people online. I feel it very strongly in schools as well, actually, when our kids were at home with the virtual classroom. What was the school doing? It was trying to recreate the classroom online, and you just can't do that. So I hope that COVID will give us, as and when it finally disappears, we hope, fingers crossed, but I hope that we won't forget the lessons, and that people will think, well, actually, how could I teach a class remotely? Because I'm probably not going to do it as though I'm standing at the front of the class speaking to a room full of kids. I've got to do it in a very different way, and people have to reinvent. Digital is not about taking the physical experience and just putting it on a screen. It's actually potentially very, very different, and people need to sort of unpack that and really think it through.
So where you're talking about taking information and a training pack and just putting it onto an e-learning course.
Exactly.
So what ELS have tried really hard to do is have a very, very blended approach. So there's lots and lots of interaction still to keep that engagement and keep that interest and motivation. Because for me, if I was a student, I can learn from an e-learning course, but I like that interaction.
Exactly.
And it helps me learn as a student. So this year, I mean, we have seen, or 2020 has brought a massive culture shock to our industries and sectors. And COVID-19 did bring a lot of sectors and industries to a grinding halt. I mean, we look at things like tourism, the culture and creative sectors took a massive hit, and you yourself talked about the performances now done remotely. And if we take the Royal Opera House, for example, that's one of the UK's most beautiful theatres. They've now conducting tours, learning, and their spectacular performances, which are truly wonderful, and have taken them all remotely. And in some ways, I think that's been fantastic for people who might have not had the opportunity to go to the Royal Opera House before or go. So actually, by doing it that way, that's been brilliant for those people who haven't had the opportunity before. So I think, sorry, go on, you're going to say something.
Well, that's totally right. And I think to be blunt with you, I think a lot of arts organisations have been very sniffy about putting their performances online. It's all about the live experience of sitting in the audience. But let's face it, a ticket to the Royal Opera House can cost you 200 or 300 quid. And there'll be people not only who don't live in London, but don't even live in the UK, who would like to see those performances. And I think the biggest breakthrough was the National Theatre, which did this, and they did it at 7 o'clock on a Thursday. So it became this kind of communal experience, although you could watch it for the rest of the week. And you could see people writing chat on the side, so you could see what people's comments were, which was a lot of fun. And I definitely think that that's not going to go away. The realization from arts organisations like the Royal Opera House that they can reach a lot of different audiences online. I mean, admittedly, they were doing it in cinemas, and you could go to the Cineworld in Didcot and see some of these performances. But I think now people in arts organisations really do understand that they can reach massive audiences digitally. It doesn't have to be the full performance. It can be a 10-20-minute extract that people want to watch.
So, I mean, that's my personal views that, you know, we've seen a lot of upheaval this year, but we've also seen a lot of opportunity. We've seen a lot of innovation. We've seen massive digitalization, and these emerging technologies. So I think, you know, there's been quite a lot of doom and gloom, but actually there's also been this fantastic innovative environment as well that will take us forward. I mean, do you think that the COVID-19 pandemic is the ultimate accelerant to our digitalization?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's going to also, I think, it's obviously had a massive impact on a lot of people and their work, and you know, people will lose their jobs, and that's a total tragedy. But there will be some good silver linings. So, for example, I was talking to BT the other day. Now they've had to move all their call center workers to work from home, and there are some regulations involved there, because if I was a call center worker now, looking at your phone bill, and my wife had just walked in as she did earlier and looked over my shoulder, that is a breach of regulations. So they have to be very careful. But the obvious point, if you're able to work at home as a call center worker, is think about the employment opportunities, particularly for women. So if you're at home with young children, for example, and it is overwhelmingly still women who do that, it's not a sexist point, it's just an observation. Suddenly you've got the opportunity to work in a call center where you might have had to commute for an hour and find childcare and so on. And you could do it flexibly. So you could do it at 7 o'clock in the evening till 10 o'clock in the evening, say 3 nights a week, without worrying about being out after dark or anything like that, or commuting. So that kind of teleworking or working from home, particularly for people who want to work part-time or flexibly, I think is a massive opportunity. But clearly, we are going to go to a hybrid existence. And I don't know about you, Kaz, but I like the fact, you know, I'm lucky in the sense that I'm sort of self-employed, but I like the fact that I could, you know, today I'm working from home. Friday, I'm working from home. Yeah. It's also pouring with rain. I'm quite pleased I can work from home. Yeah. On Monday, I'll go into work, and I like that as well. So I think certainly with office jobs, I think most people will now forget 5 days a week, 9 to 5. You know, if you're in 2 days a week, fine, work the rest of the time from home. Yeah. We obviously want you in the office to interact, what we were talking about earlier, the banter and so on, and the bonding. Yeah. And some brainstorms you just can't do on Zoom. You've got to be all around a table with the ebb and flow. But I think flexible working is here to stay.
Yeah. No, I agree. And actually, for me, I do have that flexibility if I want it. I choose to come into the office most days. It's only because my husband's working at home and it drives me mad.
Yeah, don't blame me. That's why I took the dog for walks during lockdown. It's the only way to save your marriage.
It's really funny you say that, because I have a dog and my husband takes my dog out a lot more than he used to. So I think you've definitely onto something there. I just want to because we're at 24 minutes in already. I just want to touch on a really good podcast that you did a few days back with the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and Liontree CEO Arikoff Berkoff. Make sure I get that name right. You discussed technology being a major theme and force. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? I mean, you talked in that podcast around how and what you've talked about today about how it really has changed the way we live, how technology has changed the way we work, how it's changed transport, the medical sector. I mean, it was a really fascinating podcast that I thoroughly enjoyed listening to. So, I mean, there's no denying that the digital that digital has changed businesses, customer relationships. Do you think? Did you want to elaborate more on that podcast? I was about to ask you a question, but I did say, did you want to talk any more about?
I mean, all I would say is that every business is digital now. So
Yeah.
we live on our phones and on our screens, and I feel really strongly about this, and I find it very surprising sometimes. Even if you're a self-employed builder,
Yeah.
who basically puts a card in the newsagent with your mobile phone, forget it. If you want to get work, you should basically have a website. People will want to go on now, would expect to go on a website, see some of the work you've done, possibly even be able to interact with you online, book an appointment with you online, all that kind of stuff. And it just amazes me, certainly in terms of public services. I still occasionally, my wife and I still get letters from our GP. I mean, it's just totally bizarre. So, I mean, I do also get texts and emails, but it is crazy. So, as I say, we all live on our screens, and whether you're a self-employed builder or a major company, you should have a website, be able to interact with people online. It's just a given now.
Yeah. I mean, we do live in a very competitive market as well, and I think all businesses and employers need to create and cultivate a digital culture now. And I think those successful businesses are going to be the ones that are running a digital business, and people have got to try and keep up. And I think some businesses are achieving that, and some have still got a long way to go.
Yeah, exactly.
We're at 26 minutes into our half an hour, and I've got a few questions left to ask you from people who have emailed into me. Quick fire. So we've got Shirley from Oxford. Do you believe that the arts, such as dance or music, can help fix deep-rooted social problems within our schools?
Totally. One of the things I achieved as minister was I campaigned for the health department to fund the arts. They've now set up the National Academy for Social Prescribing, so you can go to your doctor and be prescribed dance lessons, which sounds absurd and the sort of thing the Oxford Mail might attack, but actually, if you've got depression, yes, you could take drugs, but actually sometimes it's caused by loneliness and so on. And certainly in schools, without a shadow of a doubt, from learning music, enhancing your academic ability because it teaches you how to concentrate, but in particular for kids for whom the conventional school academia is not working out, giving them the outlet of drama or musical performance to kind of get all these feelings out there is so important. I cannot tell you. I work with the National Youth Theatre, and the opportunities they've given kids who were going off the rails at school to regain their self-esteem and self-confidence, massive.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I'm completely in agreement with you on that one. The next question, we've got Catherine from Harwell. Do you think that culture, music and dance have a positive link to education and particularly the growth of the brain?
Yes, they do. In fact, my mum is a trustee of something called the Musical Brain, which is a trust about all this kind of work. And as I said, I can elaborate on what I just said earlier, which is, I'm a trustee of something called London Music Masters. They teach kids in inner city schools how to play the violin together. And what they've seen is this, it really just spills out into their coursework because they learn the ability to concentrate. They learn about self-discipline, having to turn up and having to practice. And also the other thing you forget is it has this brilliant effect on the parents. The parents come and see this performance. Parents who frankly are disengaged from the school experience, and they are just blown away by what their kids have achieved, and it engages the parents back into the school community.
Yeah, and the next question we've actually already touched on during our conversation. It was, would you encourage training providers, private or public, to think through this link in the development of their work? And this is the link between culture and training. And through our conversation today, I think we've already answered that question, and we believe it's a really good idea.
Yeah, and it works both ways. There are plenty of arts organisations that could learn from businesses like yours, and you and your clients could also learn from arts organisations about how to use the arts either to keep people engaged in the workforce or improve some of their skills at work.
Okay, final question. Do you think that we keep our theatres, cinemas and keep teaching children musical instruments because it helps the agile mind?
Yes, I do think we should always value the arts in and of themselves, the ability to see a great musical performance or a fantastic play, but there's no doubt that it keeps the mind switched on, and also not just our children, but also older people as well.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, that's all our questions. I don't think we've had any more questions come in. Ed, thank you so much for joining us today and for your time and all your wonderful contributions. For our listeners and viewers, next week, the 9th of October at 1 o'clock, our coffee and chat will be on working with multiple stakeholders and the cultural requirements. Ed, thank you, and have a great afternoon.
Guys. Take care.
See you later. Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Are we all good?
Yeah.
Cool. Ed, thanks so much for that.